When I retired after 40 years of hard work, I thought life would finally slow down. My wife and I had raised 4 children, given them everything, our money, our time, our health. We believed they would stand by us in our old age. But the day I handed in my last paycheck, I realized something terrifying. To my children, we weren't parents anymore, we were a burden. A bill they didn't want to pay, and when they tried to split me from my wife and sending us to live in different houses like unwanted guests, I stayed quiet, because I knew silence would be my sharpest weapon, and one day the whole world would know the truth about what they did to us. My name is Edward, and my wife, Grace, has been my partner for over 40 years. Together we built a simple but good life. I worked long hours at a printing company while Grace raised our 4 children, Michael, Jennifer, Robert, and Claire. We didn't have much, but every extra dollar went to them. Music lessons for Jennifer, college tuition for Michael, hospital bills when Claire broke her arm. Even Robert's business idea that failed before it began, we covered that too. Grace would often remind me, Edward, we're not investing in money, we're investing in love. One day they'll be there for us just like we're here for them. And I believed her. We thought our sacrifices would mean something. That when we grew older we'd be surrounded by warmth, laughter, and care. But what we didn't know then was that love doesn't always come back from where you give it. Sometimes it comes from where you least expect it. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Michael, our eldest, rarely called unless he needed money for his mortgage. Jennifer complained that we never gave her the same support we gave her brothers, though we'd paid for her law degree. Robert only visited when he had a new business scheme. And Claire, the youngest, loved us, but she loved her husband's opinion even more. At family dinners, they would glance at their watches, eager to leave. When Grace suggested a vacation together after my retirement, Michael muttered, "We're too busy, Mom. Maybe next year." It stung, but I brushed it off. Parents always make excuses for their children. Grace squeezed my hand under the table that night and whispered, "They'll come around, Edward," but deep down, a chill ran through me, because love that has to be begged for isn't love at all. Retirement came faster than I expected. On my last day at work, my coworkers gave me a small party, and Grace was waiting at home with a warm dinner. I thought it was the beginning of peace. But the very next week, the calls began. Michael asked, "So, Dad, how much did the company give you for retirement?" He tried to sound casual, but I knew what he was really asking. Jennifer dropped by not to celebrate, but to ask if I'd consider putting her name on our house deed for future planning. Robert wanted a loan, again. And Claire? She didn't even ask. Her husband did. Over dinner, he leaned in and said, "Edward, you should think about securing your finances with family. It'll be safer." One by one, they weren't asking how we were feeling. They were asking about money. And for the first time, I wondered if all those sacrifices had raised children who loved us, or children who only loved what we had left to give. That night, Grace sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "They're just concerned, Edward," she said softly. "They want to make sure we're safe in our old age." That's all. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my children's questions about pensions, deeds, and bank accounts came from care, not calculation. So I nodded. "You're right. Maybe we're overthinking this." But as the weeks passed, their visits grew more frequent and colder. No laughter, no family warmth. Just probing questions, hints about moving in with them, subtle jabs about how hard it must be to maintain a house at our age. Grace kept brushing it off. She clung to the picture of the children she once raised, not the people they had become. And me, I chose silence, because sometimes silence is easier than admitting the truth staring you in the face. One evening, Grace asked me to grab her reading glasses from the living room. As I walked in, I noticed Jennifer's purse sitting open on the couch. I didn't mean to pry, but a folder poking out caught my eye. When I pulled it free, my stomach dropped. It was paperwork. Drafts of a guardianship agreement, the kind where adult children take legal control of their parents' finances. My name and Grace's name were right there, typed neatly at the top. Before I could process, Jennifer walked back in. Her face went pale. She snatched the folder out of my hands and snapped, "It's just precaution, Dad. Everyone does this." Don't make a big deal out of it. I wanted to believe her. But that night, lying awake next to Grace, the truth burned in my chest. This wasn't care. This was a plan. And we were the target. After that night, things changed. The phone calls turned sharper. Michael started hinting that maybe we should sell the house. It's too much for you and Mom. Dad, you should downsize. Robert showed up with a realtor friend uninvited, walking through our living room like he already owned it. Jennifer kept pushing the guardianship papers, sliding them across the table as if we were signing a cable bill. And Claire, sweet Claire, didn't speak at all. Her husband did. He leaned forward during Sunday dinner and said, "You know, Edward, nursing homes aren't what they used to be. They're safer, more comfortable. Maybe it's time to think about it." Grace's fork clattered onto her plate. She looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. For the first time, I didn't deny it. The children we raised weren't protecting us, they were circling us like vultures. One morning, I answered a call on the house phone, back when people still used them. The voice on the other end said, "Mr. Whitman, this is Evergreen Senior Living. We're following up on your son's inquiry about a room for you and Mrs. Whitman." My blood went cold. "Excuse me?" I asked, gripping the receiver. The woman hesitated, then repeated, "Your son, Michael, came in last week. He toured the facility, filled out initial paperwork. He listed you as the resident." I hung up before she could finish. When Michael came by that evening, I asked him about it. He laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Dad, it's nothing. I was just checking options. You know, planning ahead." But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the panic. He hadn't meant for me to find out. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just talk anymore. They weren't planning for our future, they were planning to take it. That weekend, they all showed up together. Michael, Jennifer, Robert, and Claire. It wasn't a family visit. It was an ambush. Jennifer placed her hand on mine and said sweetly, "Dad, you're misunderstanding. We only want what's best for you and Mom. You've worked so hard, isn't it time you relax and let us handle things?" Robert jumped in. "Exactly. You shouldn't worry about bills or the house anymore. We can take care of it." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She looked from face to face, searching for even a spark of sincerity. But all she saw was calculation. Michael leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You'll thank us one day, Dad. We're protecting you from yourselves." And Claire, she couldn't even meet my eyes. Her husband spoke for her. "Think of it this way, Edward. You gave them life. Now it's their turn to manage yours." They smiled like they were doing us a favor. But beneath those smiles, I saw the truth clear as daylight. This wasn't love. It was control. For the next few weeks, Grace and I stopped arguing with them. When Jennifer pushed the guardianship papers across the table, I nodded and said I'd think about it. When Michael mentioned the nursing home again, I smiled faintly and told him I'd keep it in mind. When Robert circled the house with his realtor friend, I simply stood by the window and watched. On the surface, it looked like we were giving in, that the old couple had finally accepted their children's plan. But behind closed doors, Grace would grip my hand and whisper, "Edward, don't you dare sign anything. Don't you dare let them win." And I promised her I wouldn't, because sometimes the best way to fight isn't with shouts or threats, it's with silence, the kind of silence that makes your enemy believe they're winning right before the ground crumbles beneath their feet. One evening while Grace was asleep, I went through the stack of mail she'd left on the counter. Mixed in with the bills was an envelope addressed to me, but when I opened it, my blood froze. It was a bank statement. Our joint account, except half the money was missing. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. Large withdrawals, transfers I hadn't made, thousands gone in just a few weeks. The signature on the authorization form, Jennifer's. She had already gained limited access, quietly moving funds behind my back. I felt the room spin, my chest tightening. It wasn't a plan anymore. It wasn't talk, they were already stealing from us. That night I sat on the edge of the bed staring into the dark. Grace stirred, whispering, "Edward, what is it?" I kissed her hand and lied. "Nothing, my love. Go back to sleep." But inside I knew the truth. We weren't just at risk of losing our home or our freedom. We were days away from losing everything. The next morning, I drove to the old library downtown, not because I needed books, But because my old friend Martin still worked there, Martin had been with me at the printing company for decades. Honest, sharp, the kind of man who never forgot a detail. Over coffee in the break room, I finally let it spill. The withdrawals, the guardianship papers, the nursing home tours. His brow furrowed deeper with every word. Edward, they're building a case to strip you of everything. If you don't act fast, you and Grace could lose control of your own lives. I swallowed hard. What do I do, Martin? They're my children. He leaned closer, his voice low. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. Start keeping records, copies of every document. Record conversations if you have to. Build proof, not for them, but for yourself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of strength. Maybe I wasn't powerless, maybe I had a way to fight back. And if my children wanted a war over their mother's pension and my home, they'd learn I wasn't too old to fight. A week later, Grace and I attended Michael's house for dinner. It was supposed to be a family gathering, but it felt more like a business meeting. The moment we sat down, Jennifer pulled out the guardianship papers again. This time she slid them across the table with a smirk. Dad, it's just a formality now. Everyone's agreed. Once you sign, things will be easier for you. Michael raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said, clinking glasses with Robert, who grinned like a man who'd just closed a deal. Even Claire, my youngest, avoided my eyes, staring down at her plate. Her silence was louder than their words. Grace sat stiffly beside me, her hands trembling under the table. And that's when Robert leaned back in his chair, chuckling. You two don't have to worry about a thing. Soon enough, the house, the bills, the accounts, all of it will be ours to manage. You'll thank us later. They laughed, raising their glasses again like victors celebrating before the battle was over. They thought they'd already won. But what they didn't know was that every word, every laugh, every plan was now being documented, because their arrogance had given me exactly what I needed: proof. That night, after Grace had gone to bed, I spread everything across the dining table: bank statements, copies of Jennifer's forged signatures, a printout of the nursing home inquiry, even a small recorder I'd tucked into my pocket during Michael's dinner toast. Every piece told the same story. Not of children caring for their parents, but of vultures stripping them bare. I packed it all neatly into a folder and locked it inside my desk drawer. The next day, I visited a lawyer downtown, a young man named Harrison, sharp-eyed and quick. I laid out the documents one by one. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Mr. Whitman, this isn't just family drama. This is attempted financial exploitation. If they push forward, you could lose your rights. But with this evidence, you can stop them before they get close. For the first time in months, I exhaled without feeling fear. Grace noticed the change in me that evening. Edward, she whispered, touching my arm, what did you do today? I kissed her forehead and said, don't worry, my love, for once, we're not the ones in the dark. The trap had been set. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. It was Robert who couldn't keep his greed in check. One afternoon, while Grace and I were out grocery shopping, he showed up at our house unannounced. What he didn't know was that I had quietly installed a small security camera in the hallway after Michael's nursing home stunt. The footage showed everything. Robert rifling through my desk drawers, yanking open cabinets, even trying to force open the locked drawer where I kept the folder. When he couldn't, he muttered under his breath, damn old man's hiding something. But the real mistake? He took a call in the middle of his little raid, loud, careless. The recording picked it all up. Yeah, don't worry. Once we move them into Evergreen, the house is ours. Papers are almost ready. Just a matter of time. That night I sat in my chair and replayed the video with Grace by my side. Her face went pale, her lips trembling. Edward, she whispered, they're not just planning. They're already acting. I pressed pause, the image of Robert frozen mid-theft on the screen. Good, I said quietly. Let them dig deeper. The deeper the hole, the harder the fall. The next week I invited all 4 of them over for dinner. Grace cooked their favorite dishes: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. On the surface, it looked like any other family meal. But under the table, my recorder was running, and upstairs my lawyer Harrison was waiting with a folder full of documents, ready to step in at the right moment. As we ate, I played the part of the tired old man. I let them talk, nodding politely while they laid out their plans. Jennifer pushed the papers across the table again. "Dad, it's time. You sign these and everything becomes easier. We'll take care of the house, the bills, your pension. No more stress," Michael added. "And Evergreen has a beautiful suite open right now. You and Mom could move in next week," Robert smirked. "Don't worry, Dad. We'll handle all the finances from here on out." Even Claire stayed silent, letting her husband explain how relieved we'd be once the transition was made. I smiled faintly, nodded, and said, "Why don't you all come back tomorrow night? We'll finish the paperwork then." They grinned like foxes in a henhouse, thinking victory was in their grasp, but what they didn't know was that tomorrow the hunter would be waiting. The next evening, they filed back into the house, smug and confident. Jennifer already had the papers tucked neatly in her leather folder. Grace sat beside me, her hands folded, her face pale but steady. Michael cleared his throat. "All right, Dad, let's not drag this out. Just sign, and everything will be handled." I leaned back in my chair, studying each of them. The children we'd raised, now strangers with familiar faces. Handled. I repeated softly. "That's an interesting word." Jennifer rolled her eyes. "Dad, please. This is for your own good." That's when I stood up, slowly, deliberately. "I've listened to all of you talk about what's best for me and your mother. I've let you push papers across my table, call nursing homes, even sneak into my house to dig through my things." Robert's face froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. I slammed the folder of evidence onto the table. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, photographs, a USB drive. Their eyes darted between each other, panic rising. "The difference between you and me," I said, my voice steady, "is that while you were planning to bury us, I was planning to bury the truth about you." The room went dead silent, and for the first time I saw fear in their eyes. Jennifer tried to recover first. She laughed nervously, waving her hand. "Dad, this is ridiculous. You're confused. You don't know what you're saying." That's when I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small recorder. I pressed play. Robert's voice filled the room. "Yeah, don't worry. Once we move them into Evergreen, the house is ours. Papers are almost ready. Just a matter of time." Robert's face went red, his fork clattering onto the plate. Before anyone could speak, Harrison, my lawyer, stepped into the room. He dropped another folder onto the table. Bank statements, unauthorized withdrawals, guardianship drafts, everything signed without consent. "This is more than betrayal. It's financial exploitation." Michael shot to his feet, pointing at me. You set us up." I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp. "No, Michael. You set yourselves up." I just turned on the light. Grace finally spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "We gave you our lives, our love, and you turned it into greed. Tonight the world sees you for who you really are." Harrison gathered the evidence calmly. "The court will handle the rest." The color drained from their faces as reality sank in. The hunt was over. The hunters had become the prey. Within days, the news spread. At church, whispers followed us down the aisle. Some people offered hugs, others shook their heads in disbelief. Everyone knew now. Not because I had shouted it, but because the legal filings were public record. Michael's neighbors avoided his driveway. Robert's business partner cut ties overnight. Jennifer's law firm suspended her pending investigation. Even Claire, who had stayed mostly silent, couldn't escape the shame of being grouped with her siblings. Grace and I received letters, some from old friends offering comfort, others from strangers who had read about the case in the local paper. They said things like, "You're not alone. Families betray too often, but speaking out takes courage." For my children, the fallout was swift and merciless. Their reputations crumbled, their social circles shrank, and the respect they once demanded turned into pity and disgust. For me, it was bittersweet. I hadn't wanted revenge in the beginning. I just wanted love. But now, watching them stumble through the wreckage of their own greed, I realized something. Sometimes justice doesn't come from punishment. It comes from exposure. The house feels quiet now, but it's a peaceful kind of quiet. Grace waters her roses every morning, humming softly while I sit on the porch with my coffee. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest is gone. Sometimes I think about my children, I wonder if they ever loved us or if love turned into greed somewhere along the way. The answer doesn't matter anymore, because love isn't proven by blood. It's proven by loyalty, and when they failed us, life gave us something better: truth, dignity, and peace. I don't celebrate their downfall. I mourn the children I thought I had, but I refuse to mourn the people they chose to become. Grace rests her head on my shoulder at night and whispers, "We survived, Edward." And I know she's right, we survived, and the world saw the truth. That was enough.